Good morning, everybody, and welcome all. Dr. Swapna is one of our earliest alumni in the psychiatry department, and I am glad that she has carried through whatever her early interests were in child psychiatry. She had done a lot of work in child psychiatry during her dissertation period, and over the last 15 years that she has been in practice, she has devoted herself to a large extent in schools and in trying to build up a significant force to promote child development. She is associated with the educational activities in a major way, and I'm glad that she has taken up a very interesting topic for today's presentation. Dr. Swapna, please go ahead and
Yes, sir.
finish in half an hour, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. It is a privilege to be, really introduced to you on this platform, and I welcome all of you at the ICR one and the alumni celebrations. So, yes. So actually, when I was asked to speak about autism, I was very interested and
Put it on the screen.
excited. So
Slideshow.
can you, yeah, can we see the
Slideshow.
screen? Sir, is the screen visible?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, okay. So when sir asked me to speak about autism, I was really very excited because this topic is very close to my heart. And when we were interning and when we were students, we were involved in the school health project where we've actually gone into the community and worked with the children. So this topic is really very close to my heart. But at the same time, I was really excited to take you all down this rabbit hole. So what is going down this rabbit hole? This is the world which Alice actually led in her Wonderland. A world which was mystic, a world which is unique, a world which is full of doubts, confusing, challenging, yet it is delightfully interesting. I wish to take you all down this rabbit hole to understand a total different world, a world of autism. And I welcome you all to let us all understand together how we can understand and enable the children on the spectrum by seeing the world at the other end. I will begin my presentation with a small narration. This is a narration of a child which was referred to me in the school where I consult. And the children are not normally referred to the resource room at the pre-primary level. The children which are normally referred to the resource room are the ones with academic and behavioral issues, higher grades. Navya was referred to me in the school. I just get a frantic call from the principal saying that Dr. Swapna, please come and see this child. We don't know what is happening with him. 1 month after the admission to the school, Navya used to exhibit a symptom or every single day she used to come up with something different. Each day was a challenge to the teachers and they really did not know how to handle her. She was a 4-year-old girl with an energy of 10-year-old. She would run all over the classroom. Sometimes she would climb the cubby holes. She would jump over the children. She would hurt herself. Sometimes she would hurt the other children. But she would not realize what is she doing in this bargain. She would go home each day with marks on her body. She would chew the crayons, but she wouldn't know how to hold the crayons and write. And at the same time, the next day she would scribble the entire classroom. Navya was the parrot in the class, and she used to constantly keep on repeating the teachers. Keep quiet is what she said as she went around. She couldn't stand in a queue, but all she knew was to just run out, go to the auditorium, and keep on moving round and round. She was a very cheerful child, but she didn't know how to relate her emotions with others. She wouldn't play. The reason when the teacher came to me, she said that, ma'am, we are really tired because we don't understand what next Navya will come up with. And we are so scared. Is there something paranormal? I mean, is she possessed? And this is what I was really asked by the teacher. I just smiled and said, welcome. Welcome to the world of autism. And I'll take you down there. So trying to understand what is the clinical presentation with autism, and I have tried to put it up in this case. Okay, so we all know autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it affects three major aspects: your social communication, your language development. There are stereotypical ritualistic behaviors, and at the same time, there is affection in the cognition. So if we understand what we normally see or the presentation is at the level of either the academic functioning or there is a problem in the behavior, there are ritualistic behaviors, there are stereotypical behaviors, or the children don't do the things age appropriately. What we need to understand is this pyramid of learning. Where does it begin from? And what, if not taken care earlier, will lead to the further affection? So if we understand this, that autism predominantly affects our sensory processing. The sensory systems of the children are primarily affected. So what does it mean? Your visual, your auditory, your olfactory, your tactile, your balance, your coordination, your awareness with respect to the environment, that is the vestibular and the proprioceptive systems, are the ones which are majorly affected. There can be a hypersensitivity to a hyposensitivity, and this is how the children normally fluctuate on the spectrum. Once this base is affected or is not intervened, where we see the problems next at the level of development is in your motor development. So what does that mean? Your fine motors, your movements of the arms and legs, your gross motor, your motor planning, your awareness of the body with respect to the environment then gets affected. Furthermore, we have difficulty in the perceptions, that is the auditory, the visual, your eye-hand coordination, thereby affecting the language and the development of the child. When all this is affected, what we finally see is the affection at the level of your cognition, at the level of behavior, that is the ritualistic and the stereotypical behaviors, and the academic development. Now let us find out what happened with Navya. So if we come back to the primary grid, the lower grid, we try to understand that Navya had tactile issues. There was hypersensitivity to touch, and that is the reason where she would like to get undressed or apply Fevicol all over her body. She had difficulty in registering pain and expressing the pain. She had oromotor issues, gustatory issues. Everything would be picked up and she would put it in her mouth. There was difficulty at the vestibular and the proprioception, so she would go in the auditorium and keep on moving, spinning, and trying to receive that stimulus, which is presented as a stereotypical behavior. When this panel is affected, how did it affect her further? Her motor planning was affected. She wouldn't know how to walk in a line, how to keep her body awareness with respect to other children. At one day, she would jump all over them. On the other day, she would just keep on climbing the cubby holes. So her awareness with respect to the environment was affected. She had a difficulty to relate to people because this stimulus in a school setup was overwhelming. So she couldn't relate to people. At the same time, if you understand, there were difficulty in the auditory and language processing. So she would understand what was said, but it wouldn't get processed. And what would come out was just the repetition. And this is called as echolalia. Her fine motor skills were affected. Her visual perception was affected. She knew how to hold the crayon, but she didn't know how to write. Her body awareness, her body skills, her body scheme was also affected. She didn't know how to get involved in a playway. She couldn't connect with her friends. She didn't know how to make friendships. When all this is affected, finally what you see is the final outcome. A hyperactive child, a high on energy child, doesn't know how to process the energy. The areas of functioning are affected. She did not know simple activities of daily living, like how to chew her food, how to maybe open her bag. This led to affection of her attention, and finally at the level of cognition, that is the peak of the pyramid, which is now exhibited, that there was difficulty in the level of understanding and comprehension. So trying to understand how autism is actually put up or presented is when your pyramid of learning gets affected from the base, and as we move higher and higher, there is affection at every level of development. Your sensory development, your sensory motor development, your perceptual motor development, cognition, then affecting the behavior and your activities of daily living. So with this, we go ahead to understand why is autism called Okay. Why is autism called a spectrum? Why is it called as autism spectrum disorders? So autism comes under this pervasive group of disorders that is called as the pervasive developmental disorders. And if you see, it's an umbrella which incorporates your autistic disorders, your Asperger's disorders, your clinical disintegrative disorder, Rett's disorder, and PDD not otherwise specified. If the common link, if we have to understand between all these clinical disorders, is that there is affection. Hello, there is affection at the level of social communication skills, the behavior, and there is a ritualistic pattern seen in all of them. The cognition and the language development varies. So as a result, we have a spectrum. Another reason why it is called as a spectrum, because as I mentioned earlier, children exhibit a hypersensitivity to a hypersensitivity. So they fluctuate between a hypo and a hypersensitivity with respect to oral skills, with respect to tactile, with respect to auditory. So there might be a child on the spectrum who's very sensitive to noise and he's holding his ears all the time. At the other child, there may be another child who's banging continuously just because he requires an input. So this is what is called as a spectrum, because the children fluctuate from a hypersensitivity to a hypersensitivity. Another reason what we see at the spectrum is an extremely high functioning child with a very good IQ, with good developed language skills, and autism also spreads from mild to moderate to severe autism, which is a classical autism where we have severe learning difficulty or a disability. So autism again runs in this spectrum, which is called as the mild, moderate, and severe. So when I say mild autism, if I want to give you an example, if this is what is, flapping of the fingers. So does it mean that a child with a mild autism will just exhibit this and somebody who's severe will show this? No. A child with autism will definitely only exhibit this as a symptom. When there is mild autism, the children are having good cognitive skills, language skills, and their functioning with this teaming is still good. They are able to have a normal or a near to normal functioning. Similarly, the child with the same symptoms on the other end of the spectrum will have severe disability. That is what we should understand when I say mild to moderate and severe. It is not that this symptom is less, that's why it is mild, and this symptom is more, that's why it is severe. So having understood why it is called as an autism spectrum, let us go ahead. What was actually missed by Navya's parents or the people in and around her, or maybe her pediatrician, who couldn't find out what was going on with her? So we need to understand what are the red flags for that need evaluation, the red flags that need attention. So developmental history in autism spectrum disorders or any neurodevelopmental disorders is very, very, very important. Parents need to really understand, or the caretakers really need to understand what milestone is being missed. And this is very common because we have parents who come up, even if the child is 4-year-old, and there is a myth that boys learn late to talk. So we have this, no, his father spoke late, or we have everybody in the family speaking late. That is the reason why we waited so long. I say no. By 6 months, if your child doesn't show a warm smile, a joyful expression, looking at new faces, or by 9 months, if the child does not respond to the noise that you make, does not understand the facial expressions, by 12 months, there is no response to the name or continuous maintaining of the eye contact, the child doesn't crawl, the child doesn't do baby talk, it is something that we need to know is important. My personal experience in autism has been that children on the spectrum are these who have missed crawling at their stage of development. They are the ones who are late to walk, and when they directly start walking by, say, 18 months or 20 months. So this crawling, which is being missed, is another key factor to understand that there could be some developmental delay which needs attention. By 16 words, there are no spoken words. The child doesn't know simple games, the way parents play the peekaboo, or, they hide somewhere and the children go and reach out. No, there are no such games. And the child doesn't understand how to relate to the environment. By 24 months, if there are no meaningful words or there is echolalia, it definitely needs attention. Another important thing that I have seen in autism is that there are many children who have developed all the milestones up to the age of 2 quite appropriately, and then there is a sudden regression. There is a sudden regression that the child just suddenly stops talking or giving response. Then it also needs evaluation. So going ahead, how do we arrive at a diagnosis? In a spectrum case, it is very important that not only your clinical judgment, your observation, and all the information that you collect from your parents and caretakers is something that you need to know. So relevant history, your birth history, your medical status, your examination of your reflexes, all the neurodevelopmental examination, your physical examination, which includes birth weight, the weight of the child, your head circumference, your reflexes are very important, along with the auditory and visual evaluation. So we have to rule out whether the child has deafness or whether the child has maybe vision issues because of which the child is not responding in the environment. Apart from that, there are many rating scales like the childhood autism rating scales or the Gilliam autism rating scales or the Indian scale for screening of autism, MCHAT, which are normally used to understand autism. The VSM that we use, the Vinland Social Maturity Scale, is actually not a scale to know autism, but to understand what is the maturity or the social developmental gap of the child versus his chronological age. So this test or this scale adds on to us to understand what is the gap in the developmental triangle that we saw we have to work out.
Swapna, we have finished 15 minutes. We better go on to the homeopathic aspect.
Okay, sir. I'll try
to go on to your cases.
Yes. So what we need to understand is that we have a team of people who work with this. We have the psychiatrist or the neurodevelopmental pediatrician, the psychologist, the occupational therapist, the speech therapist, the educators, who actually devise a program which is called as the individualized education program of the child or the IP of the child. This program needs to be evaluated, needs to be formulated, and then implemented. So they work on different areas as mentioned in the slide. You all can go through it. And we try to see to cover up, the gap which is there from the developmental to the functioning. I get this common question saying that, is autism curable or can autism go away? I will say no. All what we can do with early diagnosis and intervention is to see how well our children have better outcomes in functioning. Where does homeopathy act, or what is our role in autism? So if you see this picture very clearly, that in autism, we have an imbalance in between the development at one end and the level of cognition, language, functioning, communication at the other end. Homeopathy acts right here. It tries to restore the altered susceptibility and sensibility, thereby bringing about a balance between your sensitivity and the susceptibility. It helps to bring about the coordination. How does it do? I will take you through the journey. So I'm going to currently present you a case of Master Atharva. And Atharva was a child who comes to my special school, and he is working at the NIS section. He's 8-year-old, and he's there in the section for 2 years. The difficulty with Atharva working with the physicians or the therapists was that he was very short-tempered. He used to throw things around. Parents also complained that managing him at home and school was difficult. He wanted to be outdoors, and when he was asked to come around, he would again throw a tantrum. This was more of a fixation. The characteristic observation of this case was that Atharva would constantly reach out to throw things which he knew was important to the belongings of others. So if there was something new, if there was something striking, if the therapist had a new watch or a mobile, or if I would go to this center with my son's bag, he would not do anything to me, but he would take out things from his bag and see that it was, he used to throw it. Why he would do was nothing consistent. Like one day it would be that he doesn't want to do therapy. One day he doesn't want to eat the tiffin. Next day, it would be absolutely fine. He would do the same activity without any complaint. So every single day, the cause would be totally different. There was nothing specific why or what would instigate him. But what was consistent was his reactivity to destroy things, to throw things, to get angry very fast, and destroy those things which were definitely valuable to people. His sitting tolerance was slow. He was low. It was just around 10 to 15 minutes. His eye contact was not consistent. His response to name was fluctuating. He would prefer solitary play. At the physical stereotypical behavior, there was flapping. He was sensitive. There was rubbing of the genitalia. He was sensitive to cooker whistles. He used to hold his hands in the ear. He would not love to study, and though he, would know how to write, he would not write at all. His language was affected. He only had few high interest words, and he would know how to read his name. On reels, that is a scale which is used by the speech therapist, his expressive language was around 3 years. Birth history was an infantful. He was a full-term baby. The birth weight was normal. I called the parents to define the case because this needed an intervention, and I knew that there was something that we need to work upon with him because we couldn't go on with the therapy in this manner. His motor milestones were normal and the speech was delayed. It had started around 10 months and then it had regressed. There was no significant family and past history, and his scores were as follows. They indicated mild degree of autism with a VSMS scale of mild retardation in social functioning. The parents had started therapy quite late in time. He was actually put on therapy when he was 5. So if you understand again in this case, 5 crucial years of the child was lost in really, bringing about the development. At the physical genres, he was a fussy eater, he was a chili patient, he had the specific craving for vada pav. He had to bring vada pav every day in the tiffin, without which he couldn't survive. He had to bring it. It was more of a fixation. What led me to understand this, that Atharva used to come to school late every day. And only with the history, I understand that he is awake up to 2 to 3 a.m. And especially he finds it difficult to fall asleep on the days when there are a lot of stimulus or events taking place in a day. Like if he's gone out, if there is a temper tantrum, if there is a meltdown, if there are too many events happening, Atharva finds it difficult to sleep. His perspiration was normal, urine was normal, and he had to strain for stools. We understand here what, according to the conation, cognition, and affect model, where is the affection? At the cognitive level, you see the higher functions are affected. There's eye contact, there is a sensory dysfunction, the comprehension is low, there is difficulty in reading and writing, there is difficulty in his language. Then comes the behavior or the conation. He needs to harm. There is restlessness, there is hyperactivity, there is stereotypical behavior of flapping his hands, rubbing, preferring solitary play, and a difficulty to fall asleep. So what happens when this is affected? What do you see as the affect? There is desire to strike, there is anger, there is malice, and there is violence. So let's try to understand. We've just tried to fit this in the conation, cognition, and affect model. What happens? Why was there so much of anger, violence, destruction? So here you have an overstimulated nervous system. We know autism affects, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, along with a hyperactivity in the background. Plus, there is a lack of discrimination. Your intelligence, your perception, your thinking is affected. Another overload is hypersensitivity to sound, to noise, to emotions. What is the expression? There is harm, there is violence, there is destruction. And what does it lead to? A total disintegration of a personality of a child. There is dysfunction and there is disability. On the left, I have selected the rubrics which were striking in the case. I have tried to eliminate all the common symptoms, which were sensitivity to noise, the comprehension, the stereotypical automatic behaviors, handling of the genitalia, even the cravings, which was more related to the fixation. The totality, the rubric selected is on the right. I decided to take these: the anger, the destructiveness, the striking children in, being malicious, jealousy, restless children in, sleeplessness, and stools. So sleeplessness, excitement from is what I took it, because this is what he was exhibiting whenever there were a lot of events. He had a difficulty to fall asleep. And stools, constipation, has to strain. The repertorization sheet is available. 3 evident remedies that come up is Lux vomica, hyoscyamus, and tarantula. I would like to share my understanding of the 3 remedies. So if you understand, tarantula is the Spanish spider. It is seen in Latin America, and normally to get the spiders out of the holes, what do? Is that they play the drums, and then you have the tarantula coming out in a very rhythmic pattern. So tarantula acts specifically on our nervous system. There is a lot of energy in the child, and they have to keep themselves busy. So hurriedness, impulsiveness, desire to strike, anger is all evident in this. What is very clinically seen is they have very good sense of rhythm. They have a rhythm, the motion, desire to dance, music, which can aggravate, but more so it also ameliorates. There is a lot of hyperesthesia to touch, and all their expressions are immoral. They don't have any remorse. There is a lot of selfishness, crafty, cunning, feeling. आज माझं डोकं दुखतंय, आज माझं पोट दुखतंय, आज मला अभ्यास नाही करायचा. This is all what is a very typical tarantula child. There is changeability of moods. There is sexual excitement. They would just like to undress themselves, rub the genitals, and chilliness in the background. So there is a chilly patient. At the same time, when you have hyoscyamus, which belongs to the plant kingdom, even this affects the brain and the nervous system. The violence, the anger, the impulse control is all there, but this exhibits more in the form of mania. So there'll be a lot of delusion. Samurna kaitri yetay, mala kaitri ekku yetay. So this is what very typically that they come up with. That there are a lot of delusions, deliriums, and it works wonderfully in cases of mania. The emotions are aggravated by jealousy and fright. They have fear of animals. There is a poor impulse control, and sexuality, heightened sexual excitement is again a very common symptom. They will take out their clothes and run naked on the road. There is a lot of foolish behavior. Hyoscyamus acts wonderfully, especially in cases of convulsions. So you have this concomitant, which is also available, physicals which are there, and chilly patient. My third remedy was Nux vomica, which again acts on the nervous system. There is oversensitiveness. So in Nux vomica, also you see the irritability, the anger, the malice, the quickness to act. There are jerks. It's very well given in tics, convulsions. They have a lot of sensitivity to noise, sound, taste. There is sleeplessness because of excitement, and digestive symptoms are involved. By remedy, if you see, all the 3 remedies had classic expressions of anger, violence, restlessness, hyperactivity, malice, destructiveness. What was my key entry to the case was what I needed to know while prescribing was something which was not there evidently in the other 2 remedies, was the sleep disturbance, which is given in BBCR. 2 remedies are very evident that sleep disturbance, excitement to or emotion due to is cophia and Nux vomica. Plus the child had constipation, he had strained his stools and was chilly. So my remedy understanding was Nux vomica, the miasmatic understanding was psychosis, and the evaluation of the potency was based on the susceptibility assessment. There were qualified mentals, the sensitivity was high, the vitality was good, and hence the susceptibility fell under moderate to high zone. So the selection was 200. Even this may come into picture that even when there is so striking symptoms, why didn't I go for Nux vomica 1 then? So I would like to say that especially in neurodevelopmental cases where you have an altered immune state, where there are so much affections that have already taken place, there is so much of imbalance, a deep acting remedy in a moderate potency works wonderful. You have your time to see how the remedy is acting, and then you have your pace to take it ahead. 1M I would generally prescribe in cases in acute conditions like an acute mania or an acute psychotic breakdown. Then 1M works wonderful. So my understanding here was that even if I had the striking mentals, I had to touch the vitality from the moderate zone, and so the remedy selection was 200. What happened after Nux vomica? The child was already on therapies. So in my center, the children get therapies for all 6 days. So when the child was on therapy, you see that there is an improvement in the motor skills, the eye-hand coordination, with the respect to reading, the language, the speech. When we prescribed the medicine, his anger and violence reduced. He would look out for things and he would still throw them, but still those frequency and episodes had reduced. The restlessness, the comprehension, the steaming, the stereotypical behaviors had reduced. His sleep, constipation, and appetite had improved a lot. What worked well the best after homeopathy, and my therapists were very happy, that Atharva started sitting for 20 to 25 minutes for the session, which would be just 5 to 10 minutes. So the compliance improving was the first step towards which the therapists were very happy. And they told me, अब ये बैठने लग गया, अभी हम कुछ भी करके दिखा सकते हैं. So his response to therapy improved, the destruction of property, was reduced, and this gave a very good chance to see how he's going to progress. After 3 months, we subsequently shifted him to 203 doses. There was a further improvement in the sitting tolerance, his hyperactivity, his anger outbursts, fondling, sleeping patterns, everything had drastically reduced. With therapy, he had started reading, making full sentences, the auditory, the flapping, the sensitivity, all the concern had reduced. And our market change was that he had started participating in group therapy. A child who would just hate everybody around him, he used to push, beat other children, throw their things. This had started improving, and he had started participating in group therapy. 9 months, till 9 months, he was still kept on 200. And at the stage when I realized that the vital force still needed a stimulation because there was static, there was no further improvement, the patient was shifted to Nux Vomica 1M. And once the child was shifted to 1M, he saw a considerable improvement in the areas of cognition, speech, behavior, anger, appetite, and hyperactivity. Over the period of 1 year now, he's just kept on Nux Vomica 1M in frequent repetitions. He still loves vada pav, though he doesn't get vada pav to school anymore. And he tells us, please buy for me one. My teachers just miss his threats and they say, call him Feku, Feku. So he used to always come to us and he used to take our things, Feku, Feku. So we give him threats, they give him threats now, and they say, Tuji vastu Feku. So, that's the fun that they do. So we definitely miss the threats in this entire thing. The reason why we shifted to 1M or why the potency is still here, I would then discuss with you all in my further learning from the case. What is the role of these ancillary measures in our case? My child was kept on therapies throughout. Why is the need to do a therapeutic intervention when you can just prescribe medicines? As I told you, there is a gap which needs to be bridged. There is a gap which needs to be covered. And that will happen only when we have all the places and the parts put together. Atharva was kept on sensory integration therapy for his auditory, hypersensitivity, flapping of the hands, rubbing of the genitals, which all collaborate and come under a sensory dysfunction. Then there was occupational therapy, which was to work on his hyperactivity, restlessness, sitting tolerance, his motor skills, and to develop a play weight. Speech therapist worked on his oromotor development, language, and the conceptual understanding. The special educator worked on his reading, writing, and functional skills. When all this is put together, how will it further help? We can then work on the child with respect to his behavior modification using PECs, where the anger and fixations are taken care. Dietary modifications will help the child, and further training in the vocational and pre-vocational skills will help. What if all this is not available wherever you stay in your vicinity? What can you do? We can train our parents, and this is the biggest important facet in autism is parent support group. You can ask your parents to visit maybe a physician or a therapist, maybe a little far away in the town, and take the home program for 3 months or 2 months to work with the child at home. So a lot of measures like PECS, picture exchange communication system, TEACH, Dobbin method, LEAP are available on the internet, as well as you can ask them to visit the therapist who gives you an integrated home-based program for the parents to work with the child. So you needn't always refer the child for therapy. The parents can also work and then go and follow up with the therapist once in 3 months to see how much is the progress and take an evaluation. This is just a small picture idea to give you how these therapies work when you have working on the motor skills, the fine motor, the reading, the sensory learning, the oromotor. This is exactly the way the PECs go. We try to teach them with pictures from one system to another, helping the child to integrate. My learnings from the case. It is very easy to get carried away, especially in the case of mental symptoms, to prescribe on the basis. But it is important to understand what was missing in the case. The lack of causative factors, no evolutionary totality, striking ailments from. So I could not really jump into the prescription on the basis of the characteristic mental symptoms. The entry point to my case were the concomitants as given in the Forism 153, the physical generals, as they were the only PQRS symptoms towards individualization of the case. Importance of ancillary measures in therapeutic interventions is very, very important for holistic development. Why put the child on therapy when I can give medicine? We all wouldn't like a half-baked cake, right? We would like a cake which is at least completed with ganache and icing. Similarly, if you want a total integration or a holistic development of your child, Along with your medicines, it is equally important. The role of ancillary measures and therapeutic interventions are very, very, very important. So this is again a learning from the case that I took. This is the entire reason why Atharva, I didn't have to stimulate the vital force so frequently. This is the entire reason why he was shifted to 1M after 9 months when I found a stagnation. And now the child is only on infrequent doses because all the therapeutic interventions are right in place and taking care of the child. So my stimulation of the vital force, the sensitivity stimulation, the susceptibility stimulation reduces, and I have just kept the child on infrequent doses. Thus, a sound knowledge of the neurodevelopmental pathology, differentiation of the characteristic and the common symptoms to form the totality, remedy selection, and trying to understand what are the alterations in the sensation and functions, and how we can holistically manage the child were my learning from the case one. The learnings basically from my second case was which we wanted to bring about is the importance of a biopsychosocial model, understanding what are the causes that predominantly are involved in autism. You should understand that taking history, which I actually had missed in my second case from the mother, was what was missing. So please understand that autism, in order to come to a conclusive diagnosis, you need to understand a biosocial social model where the biological causes, the environmental causes, and the psychological causes play an important role in the genesis of the child. Just trying to sum up this last understanding was after the diagnosis and treatment, the child did not belong to the spectrum anymore, and he was just exhibiting a sensory processing dysfunction. The importance of early diagnosis, identification, and intervention for your sensory motor perception development is very, very important to understand the prognosis as well as understanding the role of biopsychosocial model. It helps you to understand the genesis as well as the manifestations and the outcomes in the case. What I again had missed in the case was the importance of the predisposing or the diathesis, which is very important. So what is the diathesis? An attribute or the temperament which predisposes an individual to the disease. So trying to understand the maternal history, trying to understand what the mother has gone during the pregnancy is very, very important to also reach to the clinical diagnosis as well as to understand the management of the case. So sorry for the rush up. Where do we act or what are the points of homeopathic intervention? So homeopathy acts on the sensory processing function. It tries to improve the dysfunction, the auditory skills, your cognitive skills, your language development. It works excellent in controlling the behavior, the hyperactivity. It regulates physiology. It boosts your immune system and at the same time reduces the overdose of the allopathy medicines or the antipsychotics and the antibiotics. If you see this triad, this is very similar to the triad of learning. And this is very important to understand how our medicines help in the development. Your thought over here would be that if my medicines are acting on all this, why do you need to give therapies? Please understand, like this is like climbing a mountain. And whenever you have to climb a mountain, say you have to climb Everest, at every stage, do you climb Everest or do you climb a mountain in one go? Some may say it is possible. But at every stage, there is a baseline which is made for people to replenish, to take over all the energy that has been lost and to prepare you to the next zone. Similarly, when you integrate your medications with the therapies, you are preparing the child to the further challenges. The child is going to increase in age, but however, there is a big gap that needs to be covered. So by integrating medicines along with therapeutic interventions, you can prepare the child for a holistic development to face the challenges, and then you will definitely have wonderful results. My last but not the least was this journey as a homeopathic psychiatrist was very similar to Alice in her Wonderland. It is curious, it was mystifying, it was confusing, full of surprises, because this sector is predominantly dominated by all the other mental health professions. So to formulate yourself and be a niche about them or to be somebody working with them requires a lot of efforts. It took a lot of challenges, but however, as Alice did not quit, I did not quit either. There are no defined rules in autism. It is just an experience which is very, very, very unique. What we all can do as homeopaths, we with our wonderful clinical acumen and homeopathy can create this world of awareness, a ray of hope, and we all can be this missing link in this autism puzzle. So when we all put our knowledge of homeopathy and clinical medicine together, we can definitely enable the children on the spectrum. A big thank you to everybody for taking your time out, and a big thank you to all my teachers and mentors who showed me this path towards mental health, the therapists, all the mental health professionals who are there, whom I worked with, and the children on the spectrum and the parents who have really given me this beautiful journey and helping me to share my experience with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Swapna. It was an excellent presentation. Sorry, we had to get away from that second very interesting case. There are not very many questions. One person is asking that how do we get parents to do the speech or OT wherever the conditions where it is not available?
Yes, sir. Yes, so this is quite possible in the remote places, or parents may also find it very difficult to spend because these therapies are very expensive. So once they have come to a clinical diagnosis, you can ask the parents to visit the therapist after the evaluation and take, as I mentioned, a home-based program. The home-based program gives you a proper structure in all levels of functioning, the motor, the speech, the language, and the parents can work with the children, take videos, and that is what they do. They send it to us. So every time we give them a feedback over what they have to, improve, change. And once in 3 months, they can again go back, visit the same therapist and take a feedback. As I mentioned, there are many apps, sites, which enables parents on the spectrum to do these therapies back home. They are easily available on the net. So please ask your parents to just visit them, or they can reach out to me. I will be more than glad to help. Is there anything more? Any more questions, sir?
Sorry, dietary guidelines?
Yes, so diet, it plays a very important role, and it is very important that all the things that cause this hyperactivity, we try to work on the children by putting them on a GFCF, that is a gluten-free, casein-free diet. Many children are on keto diets. So we have dietitians in the field who evaluate and give you a proper chart. So apart from knowing that we have to avoid junk, they are put on a proper diet which involves the gut. This is again on a very trial and error basis. We have seen many cases with very good improvement, the hyperactivity reducing. At the same time, there are cases where we don't see much of a change. So it may act well with your child. It is worth giving a try. So putting them on GFCF diet or a keto diet will definitely help the children.
Thank you, Dr. Swapna. Such an excellent presentation. I don't think that we can be tired by whatever you have said. We will try to work out some other way in which we will try to get back to you, and we can share a mountain of experience that you have accumulated over the period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thank you very much.